You know what occurs to me is that I have never talked about Thor in any capacity on the internet or in general. I feel like this is one of those movies that was just a vacuum to me this entire time, omitted from everything. And so, in order to make up for that, especially with this Look Back series, now I'm finally talking about it. I actually just rewatched it last night because I haven't seen this movie in a while. It's been a long time since it came out. It was in May 2011. A lot's happened since then. And so to go back to this movie, like it has been for the other movies so far in these series, it has just been a very interesting experience to just put yourself back in that moment of time. And I remember at the end of Iron Man 2, there was that end credits scene with Coulson showing up in New Mexico, and there's the crater in front of him, which has Mjolnir. And so naturally, it was very exciting. Like, okay, can't wait to see how they're gonna do that. And so we went to go see this movie on opening weekend and had a pretty good time with it. This was obviously the first big cinematic introduction to Thor. That's not something that they'd really done a bunch before. And it was also with an actor who a lot of people didn't know at the time, Chris Hemsworth. Not a household name as he is now. Now, if you mention Chris Hemsworth to anyone, everybody knows who Chris Hemsworth is. But at the time, the only thing that I could think of that I knew him from prominently was a couple of years prior, he was in the opening scene of Star Trek. He's Kirk's dad. He's the captain of the ship that's going down. And he was really good in that role, I'm not gonna lie. He did a very good job of, showcasing those emotions as he's hearing about his son's birth and, naming his son as he's about to die. And that scene was really great, but it is a scene. To have an entire movie after that, you're thinking, well, this is gonna be next level, right? And right out the gate, I think they hit the jackpot when it came to Hemsworth as Thor. He was not originally supposed to be Thor, though. It was supposed to be his brother, Liam. And that was something that got changed as the audition processes went on, and they realized, no, I think we should go with this guy. And that's the short version of that story. And I think they made the correct choice. I think he embodies Thor really, really well in this movie, and in the subsequent movies since. I think he's done a really good job as this franchise has gone on. I really like how he plays the sort of sincere, serious, brash, and arrogant version of Thor, who is on Asgard, who thinks everything and anything will work just because he is that good. But he's also playing that fish out of water version who has to be, facing that sort of sense of humility to the fact that he doesn't have all the answers. He doesn't know how everything works. And to sort of be put into that situation and find his worthiness again is a very good idea. It's a very interesting narrative thread that I think the movie plays very effectively. But Kenneth Branagh also, as a director, he does a really good job of making it feel very operatic. There is a sense of theatricality to everything going on, especially in Asgard, which I think is really, really nice. Like, there is this sense of, like, a stage play, even to some of the dialogue that's being said. And I think that's something to expect from Branagh, himself a very celebrated theater actor. But so many scenes feel like these massive productions, like you're seeing them on like West End or something like that. And I have to commend the fact that, he manages to create that kind of feeling around it. It's something that eventually gets made fun of, like even in Avengers when Tony makes the joke about Shakespeare in the Park, which we'll get to that movie soon. But it's balanced also fairly interestingly with the off-kilter comedic sense of things in New Mexico, where he has no idea how things work. And so to see him try the same kind of actions and do the same kind of things and say the same kind of things, and met with these, massive question marks, like, is this guy being serious or is he just out of his mind, is also fun in a certain way. You get some fun characters on Earth in the process, like Jane Foster, played by Natalie Portman, Eric Selvig, played by Stellan Skarsgård, and Darcy, played by Kat Dennings. And you've seen them in projects since as well, but they immediately have this rapport with him where they're trying to understand him, he's trying to understand them. Nothing makes any sense, and for the longest time in the movie, most of what they're saying to each other just bounces right off. But there seem to be similarities because every now and then they'll mention something to Thor and he'll be like, well, I don't know why you're calling it that. Like the bridge, for instance, the Bifrost. It's called the Einstein-Rosen bridge, of course, in scientific terms. And he's like, yeah, I mean, I guess you call it that, but it's more like a rainbow bridge. Like, I mean, when you look at it right there, and it really is a rainbow bridge. A visually gorgeous rainbow bridge, if I might add. I think it's visually very, very cool to see that in the movie. And Asgard itself looks really cool too. I'd say there's a couple of green screen background moments where you can really tell it's green screen, which is kind of, unfortunate. Like, especially watching it yesterday in remastered 4K. It's like, yeah, that's a green screen right there. But beyond that, it's very well done. This movie, of course, also introduced us to Loki, played by Tom Hiddleston, his adopted brother, who is not particularly great. And he is immediately making some villainous moves when it comes to getting on the throne. And immediately you had this feeling that, if you give this guy a little more time, I think he could really steal the show when it comes to stuff. And eventually, that's exactly what happened. But to see the seeds of that being planted in this movie, just the potential being realized of what Hiddleston could do as this character was really, really cool. And I think he did a really good job in this movie. Those were some of the best performances between him and Hemsworth. Anthony Hopkins as Odin was also really cool. This is the most I think Odin gets to do in the entire, series of movies. And he's pretty cool at it, even though he's out of commission for most of the movie because he's, in Odin's sleep. You don't really get too much with him. In the meantime, you follow a lot of adventures or misadventures with Thor on Earth, which again, entertaining, but it does sometimes take a lull in the second act because the first act is very quick moving, especially when it comes to what gets Thor banished to Earth. That entire sequence on Jotunheim where they're fighting the frost giants and the big battle happens is really well done. I do remember in the theater, though, it was a little frustrating because it was in 3D, and the 3D in our theater sucked to the point that it was basically just dark glasses over our faces. So that is a very dark scene in general. There's not a lot of light in Jotunheim. And so to be able to not be able to discern a single thing a couple of times during the movie was not fun. It made the opening scene very annoying too because it's just, Jane, Eric, and Darcy in this car in the middle of nowhere and there's barely any light. And so I remember the first scene was going on, we were like, who would we be looking at? And then you had to sort of squint and you're like, oh, that's Natalie Portman and that's okay. I guess something's happening. But yeah, that was just the thing that I wanted to mention. I just remember it being this weird pet peeve. Eventually, as the action ramps up and Thor has to make his way back to Asgard because Loki's making a mess and he's found out about his true lineage and he wants the frost giants to attack Asgard and take over everything. He is also considering that, hey, in this case, I get to take them out and also become the true ruler. But it sort of goes against Odin's wishes because he says early on in the movie that the true kings do not go seeking war. It's about when not to fight. It's to, know when it's the right time to, lay a hand on someone. And I think the lesson over there is one that is extremely poignant, and that's something that eventually Thor tries to follow and finds his worthiness again. S.H.I.E.L.D. is in the background during all of this as they're trying to investigate what Mjolnir is. They've set up base around it, and it led to a fun cameo from Jeremy Renner, who of course as Hawkeye, which I didn't really realize the first time for some weird reason. I don't know if my attention was diverted at some point, but it was only later on that it hit me, I was like, oh wait, that was Hawkeye. That was the introduction to Hawkeye. That's interesting. I don't know how I missed that the first time, but yeah, at that point of time, we had officially been introduced to 5 of the Avengers. So that was pretty cool. There was only one left. Who could it be? And the ending is a lot of fun in the process. Thor going up against Loki and then eventually destroying the Bifrost so that the annihilation of Jotunheim can be avoided. I thought that was really cool. And sorry, this is a completely disconnected point, but I forgot to mention the side characters. Heimdall, who handles the Bifrost, was cool in this movie. I think Heimdall is cooler in the next one, which I'll talk more about over there. But I will say the movie is not without its issues. I would say, like I said, the second act, it takes a bit of a lull when it comes to things happening, and it does stretch itself out a little bit. The stuff going on with Jotunheim and Laufey and, the Frost Giants coming to Asgard, that entire thing, I don't really care much for the Frost Giants as the villains. I mean, they weren't very investing as characters. You don't really get much with them either. I didn't really feel much over there. Like I said, the shield stuff isn't particularly super interesting either, and there's a couple of visual moments that could be a lot better. But overall, when I get back to watching Thor, the first one, I just appreciate the ideas that it's playing around with. It's also got a really good score from Patrick Doyle, I should say. It's a very operatic piece of music, some of it you heard in the intro to this video. And so yeah, I think it's a very fun watch. You know, revisiting was a really interesting experience, and it's a movie that, you know, I'm glad it set up the character in an interesting way going into the Avengers. And of course, created a new favorite villain, or not so much anymore, with Tom Hiddleston's Loki. And so there's a lot of, like I said, fun stuff to look back on. And you know what the funniest thing about this video is? Even now, despite having seen it last night, I completely forgot about the Warriors 3, really. Lady Sif's there, but she's not part of the Warriors 3. I don't really know what it is. They shortchanged those characters with the 3 on Earth, with, you know, Jane, Eric, and Darcy, and I was way more invested in what was going on with them than I was with, you know, anything else over there. So, guys, thank you very much for watching. I'm having a lot of fun talking about these early MCU movies, and I can't wait to talk about the rest of them that are left on my list. Next up is Captain America: The First Avenger, which should be a lot of fun. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe. Thank you very much once again, and I'll see you guys in the movies.